There we go. All right. We're cooking with gas. So, in 1927, Werner Heisenberg was trying to understand electrons, and he stumbled onto something that fundamentally changed how we understand everything. He was thinking about the building blocks of matter, but what he discovered might explain why your Uncle Randy, with his $40,000 of tactical gear and night vision thermal equipment that could spot a mouse farting 300 yards away, has never seen anything more exotic than a slightly concerned raccoon. Welcome back to the Forest Wild. I'm Charlie. Today we're talking about what might seem like a detour through quantum physics. And before you close out this thinking I'm going to get all theoretical and complicated, I failed calculus twice. The second time was actually worse than the first, but stick with me because we're going to explore how the universe itself might be playing the most elaborate game of hide and seek ever conceived. And it's winning every single time. So picture this scenario, and I promise this is going somewhere relevant. Scientists shoot individual electrons, one at a time, at a barrier that has two slits cut into it. Behind that barrier, there's a screen, and that screen shows where each electron lands. Like those old carnival games where you shoot BBs at a target. It's common sense, basic logic. Everything that your brain tells you about how reality works says that each electron has to pick one slit or the other to go through. It's a tiny particle. It goes through the left slit or the right slit, and then it hits this screen. And we go back, we can see where it hit on the screen, right? That's how objects work. That's how our reality appears to work. The electron goes through both slits, both simultaneously. One single electron existing in two places at once, passing through both openings. And then, and this is where it gets weird, it interferes with itself. It creates an interference pattern on the screen that only waves can make. Like the electron is having an argument with its own existence across dimensions. But here's where reality completely loses its mind. The moment you set up a detector to see which slit the electron actually goes through, and I mean the moment you try to observe it, not interfere with it, just watch it, that wave pattern vanishes completely. The electron suddenly starts behaving like a normal, respectable particle. It, like we thought before, it picks one slit like matter is supposed to, like you expected it to. The electron somehow knows you're watching. It changes its fundamental behavior based on being observed. For the last century, scientists have been trying to outsmart this. They've tried every configuration you can imagine. Different types of detectors, delayed observation where you don't look at the results until later, recording the data but having a computer automatically delete it before any human sees it, having machines observe but not conscious beings. It doesn't matter. The universe always knows. It's like reality has a surveillance system that makes every intelligence agency on Earth look like amateur hour. And it's not surveilling us, it's surveilling itself, making sure reality follows rules that we're not privy to. Scientists call this the measurement problem, which is basically science speak for we have absolutely no idea what's happening, but we need to call it something that sounds professional-ish. Before you observe it, a quantum particle exists in what's called superposition, all possible states simultaneously. The electron isn't going through the left slit or the right slit. It's going through the left slit and the right slit, and spinning clockwise and spinning counterclockwise. Then consciousness, and this is the key word, consciousness, looks at it and snap. Superposition collapses. All those infinite possibilities suddenly become one single actuality. The universe essentially picks one channel from infinite possible channels, but only when someone grabs the remote. Think about what that actually means. Really let that sink in. Consciousness doesn't just passively watch reality like we're binge watching Netflix, consciousness actively participates in creating what becomes real. We're not the audience. We're the director. Watching is changing. Observation is interference. We've accepted this fact for subatomic particles, but what if, and this is the billion-dollar question, what if consciousness itself operates on quantum principles? What if it's superposition all the way? Everyone knows about Schrödinger's cat. There's a cat in a box with poison that might or might not have been released. And until you open the box, the cat is both alive and dead simultaneously. What people don't know is that Schrödinger created this thought experiment to show how absolutely ridiculous quantum mechanics was. The physics community responded by saying, yes, exactly, right? Isn't it great? Schrödinger was not amused. But let's scale this up to something more relevant to our interests. Schrödinger's forest, for example. Imagine a forest existing in multiple states simultaneously. In one state, it's just trees and squirrels and decomposing leaves and maybe a few irritated mosquitoes. Normal Tuesday afternoon in the woods. In another state, that exact same forest, same trees, same Tuesday, also contains 8 to 12 foot tall bipedal hominids. Both states are equally real, both are equally valid, until consciousness collapses the superposition. But here's the twist that Schrödinger didn't consider, probably because he was too busy being irritated about the cat thing. What if different types of consciousness collapse the superposition differently? In quantum mechanics, measurement devices have to be compatible with what they're measuring. You can't use a thermometer to detect radio waves. You can't use a bathroom scale to measure velocity. You can't use a metal detector to find enlightenment. Though I've seen people at beaches who seem to be trying, and honestly, good for them for having goals, but it's kind of gross if they're wearing a Speedo. Anyway, consciousness might work the same exact way. Your consciousness, your frequency, your vibe, your energetic signature, whatever you want to call it, that's your measurement device for reality. So Uncle Randy's consciousness, skeptical, desperate, radiating, I'm going to bag me a Squatch. That energy, that frequency collapses the forest superposition into nothing here but trees and disappointment. The universe is basically running the most elaborate practical joke in the history of existence. This would explain literally everything about why Sasquatch research is so frustrating. Trained hunters with decades of experience see nothing. Expert trackers who can follow a deer through a rainstorm, nothing. Guys with night vision, thermal equipment that costs more than my car, again, nothing. Meanwhile, grandma's out picking berries, humming to herself about her pie recipe. Full visual contact. Why does this keep happening? Because Randy's not failing to find something that's hidden. Randy's consciousness is literally creating the empty forest. He's generating his own absence. His frequency determines his reality, and his frequency is permanently set to nothing to see here, move along. Randy is creating Randy's disappointment. The universe is just giving him exactly what his consciousness is calibrated to receive, which is jack squat with a side of frustration. Meanwhile, grandma gets interdimensional contact because she was not wearing $40,000 of tactical gear that makes her look like she's about to invade a small country, and the beings probably appreciate that. So here's where it gets weirder, if that's even possible. Quantum entanglement is this phenomenon where two particles become connected at a fundamental level. Once they're entangled, you can separate them by the entire universe. Literally put one in New York, one in the Andromeda galaxy, and when you change one, the other responds instantly, not at the speed of light, instantly, zero time delay. And Einstein hated this so much, he called it spooky action at a distance, which is probably the most emotional Einstein ever got about anything, including his hair situation. But it's real. It's proven. So what if forest consciousness is entangled? What if the entire forest ecosystem operates as one entangled quantum system. The moment Randy enters the forest with his conquest energy and his "today's the day I prove that these beings exist, I'm going to hunt them down" mentality, the entire network knows. Not through signals traveling from tree to tree like some biological internet, some dial-up DSL internet, but instantaneously through quantum entanglement at the consciousness level. The forest doesn't need to hide Sasquatch from Randy. Randy's consciousness already determined what reality he'll be experiencing before his truck even pulled into the parking lot. Randy's writing his own empty story, and the universe is hitting publish. There's this thing in Zen Buddhism that perfectly parallels what we're talking about. The harder you try to achieve enlightenment, the more impossible it becomes. It's like trying to fall asleep by concentrating really hard on falling asleep. Monks spend decades desperately seeking enlightenment. They sit until their legs go numb, they meditate until their brains leak out of their ears, and what do they achieve? Really impressive levels of frustration and probably some serious joint issues. Then one day, they give up. They're sitting there, maybe thinking about lunch, not trying to achieve anything, and suddenly, enlightenment. You got there. The seeking itself, that was the barrier. That it was the trying, that attempting energy. The desperate performance of spiritual yearning was preventing the very thing they were yearning for. Now replace enlightenment with Sasquatch encounter and monk with Randy and his tactical gear, and you have the same cosmic joke. Children often see things that adults don't. We dismiss it as imagination. But what if adults just have imagination deficit disorder? Kids haven't downloaded Consensus Reality's operating system yet. Their consciousness is still running Universe 1.0, the original software where everything is possible. Then we educate them. We install Reality 2.0, now with fewer features. We basically take their consciousness and we stuff it into smaller and smaller boxes. And then we congratulate ourselves on their development. By adulthood, their consciousness can only collapse superposition into pre-approved, warranty-safe, consensus reality certified states. Anything outside the approved parameters gets filtered out. We're all walking around with parental controls on our perception, and then we wonder why we can't see anything interesting anymore. We wonder why we burn out. Science demands reproducible results. If you can't repeat it in controlled conditions, it didn't happen, which works great for gravity or chemical reactions and things that don't care whether you believe in them or not. But consciousness-dependent phenomena, that's like demanding everyone see the exact same shape in clouds. The whole point is that consciousness interprets, creates, participates in what becomes real. Different consciousness, different results. That's not a bug in the system, that is the system. Science trying to prove Sasquatch using traditional methodology is like using a metal detector to find Wi-Fi signals. You're going to have a hard time, and everyone watching thinks you've lost your mind. The very consciousness state that makes someone a good scientist might be exactly the frequency that prevents observation of consciousness-dependent phenomena. It's the ultimate catch-22. To be scientifically credible, you need to be skeptical. The universe is essentially trolling the entire scientific establishment, and it's been doing it for centuries. The witnesses aren't random. They're people whose consciousness happens to be in states that can collapse superposition into, holy shit, what is that? Instead of, well, just trees and shadows. Grief cracks consciousness open like an egg, like we talked about maybe last or 2 episodes ago. All those protective shells of rationality and control, they just shatter. Suddenly you're permeable. You're open to experiences you'd normally deflect without even knowing they were there. Childhood maintains natural openness because no one's installed the limits yet. Kids are still running factory settings on their consciousness. Artists regularly access non-ordinary states because that's literally their job description. Think outside the box. That's a normal suggestion. That's their Tuesday. Near-death experiences, those permanently alter consciousness calibration. Once you've been technically dead, impossible suddenly becomes a much more flexible concept. Your whole reference frame shifts. These aren't unreliable witnesses. They're the only people whose consciousness radios can tune into the right station. Everyone else is stuck on static, and they're insisting there's no music playing. Nobody can get a clear photograph, ever. Why is that? Because the consciousness state required to see these beings is fundamentally incompatible with the consciousness state of trying to document them. The moment you shift from wow to wait till Reddit sees this, your frequency changes. It's 180. You go from experiencing to capturing, from being present to needing proof. Your consciousness switches channels. Suddenly, you're photographing an empty forest, while the phenomenon is still right there, just on a frequency that your camera, and now you, can't access. The universe has basically implemented anti-screenshot technology at the quantum level because it's apparently petty or something. Consciousness researchers call this the hard problem. How does meat create thoughts? How does 3 pounds of electric jello generate self-awareness? But what if that's backwards? What if consciousness doesn't come from matter? What if consciousness creates matter by collapsing infinite possibility into specific reality? What if what we see is entirely determined by how we are equipped to see? Then Sasquatch isn't hiding in the forest playing some elaborate game of hide and seek. Sasquatch exists in consciousness states that most of us locked ourselves out of somewhere around 3rd grade, right after they told us to stop making up stories, believing in fairy tales, and right before we learned how to be reasonable. From this point of view, all these serious hunters and researchers and expeditions with military equipment, millions of dollars in funding, decades of searching, and the universe is just sitting back going, "You're trying way too hard, buddy. You're literally preventing the thing you're seeking." And this is comedy gold. Meanwhile, grandma's out picking berries with no agenda, just thinking about the pie in the oven, and suddenly she's face to face with an 8-foot-tall forest being. So if you want to see one, stop treating the forest like it owes you something. If you want to experience, put down the thermal imaging. Enter the forest like a child who doesn't know what's impossible yet, like someone who gave up trying to make reality make sense. The universe doesn't reveal its mysteries to people demanding them with night vision and thermal desperation. It reveals them to people who aren't even looking, because cosmic timing apparently has a twisted sense of humor. And yet, there's another layer of this where the universe is revealing mysteries to the people who are demanding them, just in a different way. The universe is delivering to those people exactly what they need in that moment. What if the beings all know this? What if they're watching us stumble around with our equipment and our theories, fully aware that we're preventing our own success through the very act of trying? They're probably out there right now, existing in superposition. Every once in a while, just occasionally, someone's consciousness accidentally hits the right frequency. Suddenly, boom, contact. Then they spend the rest of their lives trying to recreate that moment with the wrong frequency. Like that Instagram reel that you accidentally swiped out of and you can't find again. It came to you because that was the moment when it needed to come to you. But now you're looking for it and you're in a different space. For consensus reality to work, for evening news reality, mortgage paying, Tuesday staff meeting reality, everything has to be separate, solid, predictable. Matter is dead. It's unconscious. Consciousness has to be produced by brains and nothing else. Time has to move in one direction at one speed. Death is final and absolute. Humans have to be the only aware beings in the universe. Unknown animals would have already been discovered by now because we have satellites and DNA testing and really good cameras, right? But every one of those assumptions is already cracked. Quantum mechanics proved matter isn't dead. It responds to observation. It maintains instant connections across space. It exists in multiple states simultaneously. Matter is participating in reality, not just existing in it. Plant cognition research shows forests are neural networks, making decisions. Time? Relativity proved it's negotiable. Consciousness? Might not need brains at all. There's too much evidence piling up that consciousness might be fundamental, not emergent. The evening news version of reality isn't wrong exactly. It's just the thin slice of the whole pie that we've all agreed to pretend is the entire bakery. But you already knew that because you're here, listening to a podcast about forest consciousness and quantum Sasquatch instead of watching the news. The next episode, we're diving into the electromagnetic signatures, the measurable fields at encounter sites that suggest these beings might exist in spectrums we can detect but can't figure out how to tune into. Spoiler alert, Randy's equipment still won't help. I'm Charlie. This is the Forest Wild. Remember, in quantum mechanics, the observer isn't separate from the observed. The act of observation participates in creating what becomes real. You're not looking for Sasquatch. You're determining whether reality will include Sasquatch. Choose your frequency carefully, or don't. The universe apparently thinks both outcomes are hilarious. See you next time.